some of the land-based declines in these comparison sets are due to other land-based competition, not to iGaming. If you look at land-based revenue across the Northeast, which is pretty much where iGaming is legal, revenue has plateaued in states that do not have iGaming. State like Maryland is a good example. Land-based has plateaued. They have not legalized iGaming.
Welcome once again to Low Rollers, the weekly gambling industry podcast presented by CasinoReports.com in partnership with DraftKings Casino. I'm Third Planet Media senior editor Eric Raskin, back from a little vacation. The pod didn't take a week off, but I did. I spent 4 days in Atlantic City, didn't quite make it to the casinos during what was mostly family time and dog walking time, but I did do some gambling on my phone. Casino games, poker, sports betting, fantasy, all of the above. So, yes, cannibalization is real. There's all the proof you need. And actually, cannibalization is one of the topics I'll be discussing this week in the interview segment, coming up in just a couple of minutes. I will be joined by Gene Johnson, the Executive Vice President at Victor Strategies, a man with a long and varied history in the gambling industry, who actually got his start at one of those Atlantic City casinos that I didn't visit last week, although it happens to be a casino that doesn't operate as a casino anymore, so I was never playing there last week regardless. In any case, I'll get Gene's views on the cannibalization debate, on the iGaming legalization outlook, on sweepstakes and prediction markets, and on his partner Victor Rocha's passion and tendency to occasionally display a little too much passion. But before I bring on Gene, and before I monologue about the latest industry news, I want to tell you about DraftKings Casino. Big thank you to DraftKings Casino for sponsoring Low Rollers. DraftKings Casino, the home of Lightning Link High Stakes, and while the special promo offer tied to Lightning Link High Stakes was originally set to expire August 23rd, it has been extended through August 30th for new customers. New players just need to make a minimum of $5 in wagers and they get 1,000 flex spins, including 500 Lightning Link spins. Details on the next offer to come next week, but for now, the Lightning Link promotion continues to rain down. For the promotion, you must be 21 years of age, physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or West Virginia. Void in Canada. Eligibility restrictions apply. 1 per new DraftKings Casino customer. Opt-in required. Spins issued as 50 spins per day upon login for 20 days. Game availability may vary. Offer ends August 30th. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Okay, some recent industry news that's worthy of a quick commentary, and I'm borrowing, or perhaps more accurately, stealing, from my former co-host Jeff Edelstein here, but he wrote a couple of pieces in the past week or so challenging polls and studies that reported highly questionable results and that not nearly enough people questioned. There was a study by a group called Betterment that said Gen Z is pivoting from traditional investing in stocks and such into investing in sports betting, viewing sports betting as a long-term investment strategy. And there was the Gallup poll that said whereas 64% of Americans participated in gambling a decade ago, only 45% do now. I'm not going to get too deep into the flaws of the polling, some of which were obvious, some of which required a little more digging, but Jeff did a great job of all that. Check out his articles on Casino Reports and InGame. The thing I'd rather focus on is the way people are running with these sensationalized top-line takeaways rather than examining them first. Just one of the many lousy effects of our 280-character, 24-hour news cycle society. Basically, the reaction is, oh, this is interesting. Gambling is way down from 10 years ago. I'd better tweet that out and comment on it. Obviously, there are not fewer people gambling than there were 10 years ago. There are fewer people playing Pokemon Go than there were 10 years ago. If a Gallup poll told me that, I'd believe it. Maybe there are fewer people playing the card game Bridge because an older generation is dying off and it hasn't caught on as much with younger generations. I could see that. But gambling? I mean, use a little common sense before you quote a Gallup poll that, by the way, spells out that this was a poll limited to people who pick up the phone, which is hardly anyone under the age of 70, and also a poll that mentions in smaller print that the version of the poll conducted online got different results. Anyway, I'm glad Jeff is around to drill down and offer a counterpoint and challenge the top-line results, but I suspect it's too late by the time he does. Nobody remembers the retraction when a story turns out to be false. They just remember the first thing they read. So I guess the point of all this is, if you're listening to this, if you're in the industry, if you're on social media, please try to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And instead of reacting in horror as you quote tweet a shocking poll or study result, pause and question the validity of the information first. Because I don't know much, but I know there are not fewer people gambling 8 years post-PASPA than there were 2 years pre-PASPA. Okay, let's get to the interview. Please enjoy a few seconds of music, and when I come back, I'll be joined by Gene Johnson. Some weeks on Low Rollers, I welcome podcast guests with a very specific lane of expertise, and other weeks, I welcome people who could talk about pretty much every topic in the gaming universe and have real insights to offer. This week's guest fits into the latter category, I think. He's worked in the gambling world for 37 years in a variety of capacities: casino marketing, strategic planning, market research, tribal gaming, and on and on. He's the executive vice president at Victor Strategies. He now makes his very long overdue Low Rollers debut. Gene Johnson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here.
So there are a bunch of topics I want to cover today, but before we get into any hot button issues or industry trends, let's start with the topic of Gene Johnson. I want to know a little about you and how you got into this business. But first, actually, I see in your bio, your full name is E. Eugene Johnson. Are you willing to reveal what the first E stands for? And did you ever consider being an EE like E.E. Cummings?
Yes, to the second question. But the first one stands for Edward. And I'm actually a junior, so I blame my father for this. But he also went by the middle name. So,
and did he go by Gene or Eugene?
He went by Gene. And of course, I worked in the casino industry in Atlantic City, where all of my vice presidents used their middle names. So I fit in, I guess.
Yeah. Was there ever any consideration when you were young to being an Ed or an Edward, or your parents started calling you Gene and that was that?
They tried calling me Edward, but it didn't work. I had aunts and uncles that did that, but they were unsuccessful.
All right. So on to the more serious business of your background. Your first job in the business was working for Showboat in Atlantic City in 1989. How did that come about? And was the casino industry on your radar at all before that?
Not too much. I was working as a database manager in Trenton for a title search company. I ran the database for company that did name searches. So when you go and buy a house, you get a title binder that has all the judgments against people with your name. So I was the guy that made sure that those names were correct. We had a consultant who worked in the casino industry in Atlantic City. He told me that the Trump Taj Mahal was opening and I should come down and interview. They'd probably give me a job. And he was at the Showboat. I went to have lunch with him. The IT director hired me on the spot, and I never made it over to work for Donald Trump.
For better or for worse, that's to the listeners to decide, I guess, depending on their opinions.
But it was a pretty broad education. I came in through IT, worked in quality assurance, worked in market research, strategic planning and analysis. We actually ran total quality management through a casino environment, and that was quite interesting. So it was an opportunity to pretty much learn every aspect of the business and do that from a management perspective.
Could you have imagined at the time when you first started working for Showboat, did you think I may remain in the gaming business for the next 3 or 4 decades, or that was kind of not a thought that you had as when you first took the job?
It wasn't my career focus. When I started in this industry, there were only 2 places in the country that you could gamble, and that was Nevada and Atlantic City. The expansion of the casino industry since then has been amazing, and it's been rewarding for me. But it's also been fascinating. Some of the people I've met have been some of the best people I've ever met in my life, particularly in tribal gaming. You think of the casino industry as a predatory, evil, money-making corporation, but it's actually a lot of very trustworthy and upstanding individuals I meet.
It sounds like even if this wasn't the planned career path, looking back, 2026 Gene Johnson, looking back on 1989 Gene Johnson, that you're happy that you fell into this line of work.
I am. It's an exciting business to be in. I don't think there's ever been as much change in the industry there is today. I've been here 37 years, and it's always been changing. It's always been exciting. And that's one of the things I think that fascinates me most with it.
Yeah, that's funny. That leads into a topic that I thought we might end with, but since you just brought it up, let's use it as our first gaming topic, sort of the bigger picture element. As someone who's, in his fourth decade in this business, how do you feel about the rapid pace of change nowadays? Does it more excite you and challenge you, or does it more aggravate you, the speed at which things are changing lately?
All of the above. The aggravation comes from people trying to force the issue and get into the gaming industry without the knowledge and baggage, if you will, of somebody that has been in for a long time. In Atlantic City, for a key license, you had to go through a tremendously invasive investigation process. And you realize that you were working in a sin industry and that public opinion could easily change and that you were basically operating at the pleasure of the regulators and the legislators and public opinion. None of that holds with some of the quasi-gaming verticals that are trying to become masters of the universe today.
Have you sort of been forced to adjust your approach to the business in these last couple of years? Have you made significant changes to the way that you approach everything that you have to do because of this sort of pace of change and all these new players? Obviously, there's the adjustment to just fighting against what is and isn't legal and permitted. I know that that's been a big change, but are there other ways in which you're sort of adjusting your day-to-day in 2025, 26 compared to years prior?
In a word, no. I haven't adjusted my approach. It's still an inquisitive one. The difficulty, maybe the frustration, is in keeping up with everything, keeping track of all the new developments. Every day there's a new scandal on prediction markets. It's hard to keep up with this.
Yes. As a member of the media, I would agree that, which is in some ways good. We always have something to write about, report on, investigate. But at the same time, it is tough to keep track of everything going on and not to miss some things with so much news flying at us. I want to talk about a gaming topic that won't go away. The question of whether or to what extent legalizing online casino cannibalizes brick and mortar casino. And I know from trading emails with you several weeks ago that you have a particular take on this as it pertains to mature land-based markets. So not really a question here, more of an I'll give you the floor, but what are your observations about land-based revenue in mature markets?
There's been an awful lot of misinformation on this topic. Does iGaming cannibalize land-based? Well, of course it does. Substitution behavior is always happening. When you go to the grocery store, especially with an era of higher prices, you're going to make certain decisions. You may substitute one product for another. That's no different from what's happening with iGaming. But in terms of adapting to a changing consumer marketplace, it's the future. And it's pretty hard not to imagine casinos, like every other business, not having an online presence. I was involved early on in legalization efforts for iGaming in New Jersey. And we looked at it long and hard. And from what we can determine, problem gambling rates are pretty much identical to what you see in land-based. There's increased access, but there's no increase in addiction rates that is credible. The increase in revenue for states that have adopted it, there are only 8 states now, but it's in New Jersey has been generating more revenue than land-based. And that's, of course, generated concern. People have said that there are fewer jobs in places like Atlantic City. Well, that's true, but that's really been something that was more impacted by the pandemic. Casinos have learned how to operate more efficiently. And there have been a number of studies done on the reduction in land-based revenue in states that have allowed iGaming, and a lot of that is very misleading. Some of the land-based declines in these comparison sets are due to other land-based competition, not to iGaming. If you look at land-based revenue across the Northeast, which is pretty much where iGaming is legal, revenue has plateaued in states that do not have iGaming. State like Maryland is a good example. Land-based has plateaued. They have not legalized iGaming. It's the same situation you see in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, et cetera, in Connecticut. Connecticut's been heavily impacted by gaming in Massachusetts, which was pretty much 1/3 of their feeder market. But if you look at New Jersey, particularly July's numbers were very encouraging. Land-based was up by 7%. Online was up by 12%. Sports betting was up by 30%. The overall month was a 12% increase in revenue from last year. Year to date, land-based is up 3%. Online is up 15%. And sports betting is actually down almost 3%. So it's a question of, I think, spending in the right areas to bring people into land-based venues. New Jersey is a destination market, and last year, land-based didn't perform as well as online, but they also didn't have many land-based events. They didn't have the summer concerts. They didn't have the air show. A lot of this has to be taken into consideration as well. But bottom line, New Jersey is on track to have their best year ever for the casino industry. Land-based had peaked in 2006 at about $5.2 billion. And with expanded gaming in New York and Pennsylvania and neighboring states, a number of casinos closed, and land-based was generating half, a few years later, generating half of what they used to. In 2022, when they factored in iGaming, total revenue had actually surpassed the 2006 number. 2025, they made close to $7 billion in all verticals. And in 2026, they've already racked up $4.2 billion. They're on track to surpass last year's number by a large margin. The bottom line is that the two verticals are complementary. That you have an omni-channel offering that caters to response to demand in an evolving market. More and more people are online. Casinos have to get there.
It's interesting you brought up the pandemic and the perception of job loss. It would seem a pretty good case could be made that in New Jersey, online casino saved a lot of industry jobs during the pandemic because at least the casino companies were able to keep money coming in for those 3-4 months that casinos were basically closed. I mean, obviously, we don't hope for a repeat of a pandemic or, that sort of situation. We hope to be kind of once in a lifetime. But is that something that you can kind of point to in making the case that legalizing online casino serves as, a nice backup plan should land-based go haywire for whatever reason?
Well, you have evidence of that in the months that the New Jersey casinos were closed down. Land-based was generating zero revenue, zero tax dollars, while online was actually growing. And in New Jersey's case also, they were one of the first into the game. And if you go to Jersey City now, you'll see that there's actually a tech hub revolving around iGaming that is indigenous to the state. It's been a good story for New Jersey. And I actually collaborated with Alan Meister back in 2019 to do an assessment of the New Jersey iGaming industry. And back then it was producing more than $1 billion in economic impact. I'm sure that's more than doubled if we were to do the same study today.
I guess to play devil's advocate, one thing that people push back on when talking about that, yes, New Jersey has seen overall revenues go up thanks to online continuing to grow. One area that some people push back on that with is for the casino companies themselves, they get a relatively low percentage of the online revenue, which they're sharing with their partners. If someone, makes that argument back to you that, okay, total revenue is higher, but the land-based casinos aren't necessarily seeing enough of it, what's your counter to people who try to make that point?
Well, I think it goes back to UIGEA, which sort of set the casino industry in the U.S. back in terms of online. But they are making money that they wouldn't have made otherwise. And the state is reaping the benefits in terms of tax dollars. And certain operators, such as MGM and Caesars, have their own online casino, and they're doing very well, thank you. I could point to tribal gaming in the area of sports betting, where the jurisdiction like Arizona or Michigan, most of the tribes are getting a small percentage of net revenue for a white label deal where they essentially sell their license to a large consumer-facing sports betting operator. Being able to develop your own operation, a white label operation, is much more beneficial in the long term, both in jobs and in revenue.
I'm curious, you mentioned Maryland. That's a state that doesn't have online casino. Land-based revenue is kind of plateauing. Maryland is one of the leading states in terms of considering legalizing online casino. Whether Maryland or any other state, where would you set the odds right now on at least one new state legalizing online casino in 2027? How likely or unlikely is it that we get one over the finish line?
I hate to predict that because I've been wrong in the past. But you see, states like Maryland, Virginia isn't out of the question. Indiana has been looking at it for ages. Illinois has considered it. They have every kind of gaming in Illinois. But I would say one state this year would be ambitious. Maryland's the likely candidate. We'll see what happens.
What about if I give you a little more time span? Set an over-under on a number of states that legalize by the end of 2030. Where would you put the line there?
I would say half a dozen. And I think there's pressure coming from the fact that if you're not doing iGaming, somebody else is. And now you're seeing increasingly prediction markets, you're seeing sweepstakes casinos who are filling that need, but they're not well regulated or regulated at all. They're often offshore, and there's no benefit in terms of jobs or tax revenue.
I do want to talk actually about the threat of sweeps, the threat of prediction markets, all that. But there's a topic I want to make sure to hit on first, and then maybe we'll double back to those. And that is, I'm dying to talk about your outspoken friend and partner in Victor Strategies, Victor Rocha. To the limited extent that I know him, it seems the fiery person he is on Twitter, that's pretty much who he is in real life. Do I have that right? Is that accurate? Or are there differences in your view between public Victor and private Victor?
Who are we talking about? Could you refresh my memory?
Victor Rocha?
Oh, yeah, that guy. Working with Victor is a blast. And I first started working with him when I was still at Spectrum Gaming Group, and we were helping produce Victor's conferences. And we hit it off very well and assisting him in designing the conferences and generating content. Victor is brilliant. He's charismatic. He's passionate about issues impacting Indian gaming. For those people who don't know him, he's something of a Renaissance man. He knows a lot about many, many things. He's a wonderful person, and I'm very happy to call him a friend. Sometimes that passion has cost us clients trying to run a business, but generally it's been the right thing to do. We can't betray our principles when it comes to supporting tribal sovereignty and tribal Indian gaming.
I mean, as far as those things that he does that maybe cost you clients from time to time, maybe this is a good analogy I'm about to make, maybe not, but my mother is in her early 80s, and she occasionally vents about the world on Facebook or overshares a little. And on a handful of occasions, either I or one of my brothers has said, Ma, you should really delete that post. Has Victor ever tweeted something that made you say, oh boy, that's going too far. That was a bad idea. I need to recommend he delete that?
I don't tell him what to post, and I don't tell him what to delete, but I have mediated several personal confrontations. Like I said, Victor's passionate. When he's wrong, he'll realize it. And if it's necessary, he'll apologize. He gets carried away sometimes, but he's fighting the good fight. And it's amazing what he's been able to accomplish in terms of bringing the heat on sweepstakes and making prediction markets sweat.
That's a perfect lead into the other topic that I sort of pushed back in order to talk about Victor first is, he holds a lot of influence, no doubt about it. How vital a role do you feel he played in what to this point has been a largely successful crackdown on sweeps? We'll sort of separate out sweeps and prediction markets since sweeps came first and the crackdown has gone further to this point. How vital a role do you feel he played in that?
Crucial. I think Victor was the single most influential person in the fight against sweepstakes. And that's not to take away from many of the other people who were involved, including Tress York from the American Gaming Association, and particularly Howard Glazer of Light and Wonder. Howard was one of the first to bring the light on this, and it was at his panel discussion at G2E, I believe it was 2 years ago, where this all came to a head. At the time, sweepstakes were described by one of their proponents as the primary entry point for online gaming in the U.S. This was in a talk with investors, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But now sweepstakes are in retreat. The curtain has been pulled away, and people have been able to see that this is gambling. It's not a benign offering. And the companies that have been promoting sweepstakes are just hoovering money out of the U.S. and taking it offshore. I think you probably saw the recent headlines about Lawrence Escalante, Lambo Larry, what a great role model. And, he may go to jail, even though he is a billionaire. But the particular G2E session was pretty amazing. We went to a reception the night after that most controversial panel of G2E. And Victor called it a vampire party. Everyone was talking about getting into sweeps. And that's when it dawned on us that this is a threat to legal gambling. And it had gone under the radar for so long. The same proponent who had made the comments about being the primary entry point was talking about the demographics. They were targeting people who didn't believe it was really gambling. And to me, that's dishonest and, reprehensible.
And there is a play money element to it, a way to, as the social casino aspect that is potentially, theoretically available for free. But of course, we've all seen the numbers that the majority do end up gambling for real money on these sites.
One of the things we do at Victor Strategies is consumer research. And we've talked to people that play sweepstakes and social casinos. Social casino is great, but the people who play sweepstakes, many of them, the ones who are putting in a lot of money, realize that it's gambling and realize they can make money doing it. Or that's the lore. Usually it's not the case.
You mentioned, now sweepstakes are in retreat, were the words you used. Prediction markets, I guess I wouldn't quite call them in retreat. They largely are, although I guess you could say that at least they're in a lot of legal hot water, but they're certainly not in retreat. What's the difference? Is it just a matter of timing largely that sweeps came first? They're in retreat first. You expect prediction markets to eventually be in the same boat? Or is it just, apples and oranges, and there's no reason to assume that prediction markets will be as easy not that it was easy for your side to defeat sweeps, but that they will ultimately be in retreat as well? What do you think is the difference there?
I'll go back to Howard Glazer again. And back during the sweepstakes fight, he said, don't get too happy at this point because there will always be something else to come along. People are going to find out ways to try to get around legal gambling. And he was right. Sweepstakes are the case du jour. I'm sorry, prediction markets. In the case of PMs, they've been around for a long time, and it hasn't been an issue. But 2024, some smart people figured out a way to get around state-regulated gaming and offer sports contracts through prediction markets. This is nothing more than an end run around legal regulated gaming. And the idea that this has always been legal since Dodd-Frank amended the CEA in 2010 is ludicrous. The court cases have been revealing. The Supreme Court has a canon that Congress does not, quote, hide elephants in mouse holes, unquote. And that has been cited multiple times in these court cases that, having been a veteran of New Jersey's 7-year fight to legalize online sports betting and overturn PASPA, we were certain that there is no option for legal sports betting in federal law. Well, I'd just go back to New Jersey's case. In 2011, New Jersey passed a referendum allowing online sports betting. And it was opposed by PASPA, was considered illegal, so was never launched. Then in 2012, Governor Christie signed a law authorizing online sports betting pursuant to the referendum, and that was opposed. So New Jersey fought for 7 years to legalize sports betting, when all along we could have been doing it on Kalshi. And to the second part of your question, I think prediction markets are now on the defensive. The New York and Utah cases against Kalshi were landmark decisions, and they've solidified the opposition. In addition, public opinion has turned on the many cases of insider trading. Most recently, at the DC crypto confab, prediction markets were uninvited after having been invited because the administration is embarrassed by them and worried that they'll cloud the waters for passage of the Clarity Act. I would say that the tide has turned on prediction markets, and that the end game, I think, will be divesting sports contracts. Nothing wrong with predictions on the weather, on, say, the name of the next royal baby, that sort of thing. That's been going on forever, and it's not an illegal gambling market. But as Victor likes to say, what is Kalshi without sports? And that's the case. It remains an existential threat to legal regulated gaming, because if you can consider the outcome of a sporting contest an event, You can easily consider the turn of a card an event, the fall of slot reels an event. And as the lawyers for Kalshi said in 2024, I believe it was, that they just wanted to do elections. They would never get into gaming. Well, they're into gaming. And I think the end game for this may be nationwide crypto casinos for 18 and older. Just the concept of bet on everything. There are no rules. Or maybe bet on anything is a better word to use. And it goes along with the regulatory retreat that has accompanied the current administration in Washington.
So you say that the end game you think is that sports betting divests, that they'll be able to legally do the other things that they were previously doing. But I mean, that's obviously, I guess, is that more a prediction that you're making, or that's what you hope to see happen? And ultimately, I think we're all waiting that this is going to go before the Supreme Court and end up in their hands to decide.
Dustin Gouker has talked about opening a prediction market on the chance of the prediction market surviving this. Chairman of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, Mike Dreitzer, was at the conference in Oklahoma and said that today we are definitely in the upside down. If you reference to Stranger Things, that we're in a situation where a regulatory agency, which is supposed to regulate companies, is, well, my friend Richard Schuss likes to talk about regulatory capture. This is regulatory cheerleading. I mean, they are just as good as the marketing department for Kalshi, and they seem to be in close collusion with the prediction markets. This is unprecedented, and especially for gambling. This is repudiating the trust that has been placed on you by the people of the country and the states as a regulatory agency. So, yes, I think that what they're doing now is promoting illegal gambling, and that Mike Selig could go to jail for it.
Those are some high stakes as this all sorts itself out over depending on, who's in what positions of power a couple of years from now and so forth. But lots of interesting stuff there. And it all, I guess, ties back to the idea that things are changing more rapidly in the gaming industry than ever before. And you go back to when the pace of change was a lot slower than it is now. But they keep us on our toes, certainly, Gene.
It has been a fast-paced industry. And I go back to the expansion in the 90s where every couple months a new state would legalize casinos. We've seen the same thing with sports betting in more recent times. It's a fascinating industry. And as I said, I've met some of the most amazing people during my journey. And Eric, you seem to be one of them.
Amazing is a little strong, but if you consider me at least like moderately interesting and worth spending a half hour talking to, I would certainly consider that a win if we can lock that description in.
You have Springsteen on the wall. You're okay.
So where can our listeners go to keep up with you, connect with you? Is LinkedIn their best bet, Gene, if people want to connect with you?
LinkedIn is good. Our email is listed there, I believe. And I would encourage people who are interested in tribal gaming to tune in to the New Normal Wednesday webcast by the Indian Gaming Association. And of course, Twitter seems to be the battleground of gaming confrontation right now. So that's always good too.
All right. Well, as I said when I introduced you, a little bit on the overdue side for having you on, but I appreciate you carving out some time to join me on Low Rollers. It was great talking to you, Gene.
Thank you, Eric, and it was a pleasure, and I'm a big fan of your work.
Oh, thank you. And I expect I'll have you on again before too long. I don't think this is a one and done.
Very good.
Okay, my thanks again to Gene. Really good talking to him. And before we started recording, he mentioned in his pre-casino employment days in his 20s, he worked security on a lot of shows for Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, and I am officially very jealous. Gene, if you're still in touch with Bruce and you can help me book him on Low Rollers, please let me know. Okay, so as I noted at the top, I took a vacation last week, which opened up a little extra time to gamble. And one thing I've been doing more of than I ever have before is NFL best ball drafting. And may as well note, I do it exclusively with our sponsor, DraftKings. As I record this, still about 2 weeks until the regular season starts, and I've already surpassed my previous high number of drafts, and I'm definitely planning to do quite a few more. I just love the challenge. It's a really fun 45 minutes or so, although, one quick complaint, I'm getting sick of picking 12th. That's happened in 25% of my drafts. I've also had a bunch of 9th, 10th, 11th. So I'm getting a lot of the same players available in the first 4 to 6 rounds, and I haven't had a single number 1 pick yet. So I have 0% Jahmyr Gibbs, and that is decidedly unfun. And I have to talk about one particular draft I did on August 16th, which I shared a screenshot of on Twitter. Even though it was 10 a.m. on a Sunday, I have to assume the guy with the number 1 pick was drunk, and the guy picking second was only marginally more sober. First overall in this draft, Joe Burrow, who typically goes around 60th. Then the next guy took JSN rather than either Gibbs or Bijan, which is not quite indefensible, but is close to indefensible. And then the next guy took Bijan, which means Jahmyr Gibbs fell to 4th. On the way back, the semi-drunk guy took Cam Skattebo, 23rd overall, about 10 or 12 spots ahead of ADP at the time. And the very drunk guy took Christian Watson, about 40 spots too early, followed by Tucker Kraft with the first pick of the 3rd round. Now, on the one hand, great. I was picking 10th. I ended up with a slightly stronger team than I usually do because roughly 1.5 of my competitors were wasting their picks. But it did get me wondering how often this happens, that 1 or 2 people in a draft are just behaving idiotically, and therefore how often my teams that advanced to week 15 are up against some stacked teams that benefited from having drunk or drunkish people in their drafts. Anyway, bottom line, I love best ball. I would like to be the beneficiary of bad drafters more often. And please, best ball gods, let me have Jahmyr Gibbs one time before the regular season begins. And with that, until next week, this has been Low Rollers, Small Stakes, and Hot Takes.